Picture a completely ordinary family photograph. It's the kind of regular snapshot stuck to a refrigerator door with a plastic magnet, like the ones in your own home or your friends' homes growing up. This particular family photo features a family of 4, a mother, a father, and their 2 daughters who are 15 and 10 years old. Everyone in that photograph looks perfectly fine. They look happy. But the chilling reality of this image is knowing that within a single week, one of those people will be dead. The crazy part is there was no massive buildup to this. No warning signs, no secret affair, no hidden money trouble. I don't even think anyone was really fighting. It literally happened overnight. And it all started with a cheap cardboard game sitting right on their living room table. You know how everyone has that one friend who swears their house is haunted because a plastic piece slid across an alphabet board? Well, this family sat down to play around with one on a random evening, and by the time they stood up, the grandmother had completely lost her mind. It's like the board somehow hijacked her brain and convinced her that she had to pick up a kitchen knife. Now, how could a regular household completely unravel in a matter of days? Let's look at who these people were before the night everything changed. Our story takes place in Minco, Oklahoma. It's a peaceful farming community of about 1,400 people sitting roughly 30 miles outside of Oklahoma City. It's a tight-knit town where neighbors genuinely look out for one another and life moves at a quiet, predictable pace. The father of the family was Brian Roach. He was 34 years old, lived a very normal life, and was married to his wife, Tammy, who was also 34. And together, they were raising their 2 young daughters. Brian was known and described as a dependable, hardworking guy. And after the tragedy, investigators meticulously combed through the family's history, looking for hidden conflicts, debts, or any kind of domestic issues. And they found absolutely nothing. There was no history of law enforcement calls, underlying problems, or anything that raised any red flags. Before this night, the home was genuinely a peaceful place. Living close enough to be a staple of their daily life was Tammy's mother, Sue Elvaker. She was 53 years old and had lived over 5 decades on this earth with a completely clean record. She also had no history of violence, mental illness, nothing that would make you think she was a ticking time bomb. This was a loving grandmother and a quiet family in a town where major crimes simply did not happen. But resting somewhere inside that peaceful household was a Ouija board. Now, I feel like almost everyone listening to this has some kind of personal relationship with that object. It's either you grew up in a strict house where that board was banned because your parents thought it opened a doorway to hell. That would be my parents, absolutely not. Or you played with one at a junior high sleepover. You pushed the plastic piece around yourself to freak out your friends, and you realize it's just a toy. But historically, the origins of the game are deeply rooted in human grief. It came out in the 1890s during a massive spiritualism craze. Back then, the Civil War had just wiped out hundreds of thousands of young men, and terrible diseases were taking kids from almost every household. Nearly everyone was mourning someone they lost. This huge cultural movement started because people so desperately wanted to believe they could still talk to their dead relatives. Parlors were packed with folks paying good money for seances just to hear one more word from a child or a husband. Eventually, some businessmen figured out how to package that grief into a cardboard box and sell it for profit, which is what you know of today. A flat board, the alphabet, the numbers 0 through 9, and a little heart-shaped pointer for your fingertips. A mainstream company bought the rights, and suddenly, a tool born out of deep human mourning was sitting on the store shelves right next to Monopoly. We put a grief machine in the toy aisle. By February of 2001, pulling that board out of the closet turned from a casual curiosity into a nightly routine for the family. Carol Sue, Tammy, and the two young girls would all gather around the table, rest their fingers on the plastic piece, ask questions, and watch it navigate the letters. During these sessions, a severe psychological shift occurred within Carol Sue. According to official court documents, she stopped viewing the board as a game or a parlor trick, and she became completely convinced that that board was her direct personal line of communication to God Himself. Think about that sheer psychological pressure that puts on a person. If you think a ghost is talking to you, you can get scared, pack up the game, and close the closet door. But if you truly believe the creator of the universe is on the other end, questioning the message doesn't exactly seem like an option anymore. And whatever that plastic pointer spells out suddenly feels like that is absolute law. And in mid-February, the board began spelling out highly specific messages about Brian. It told Carol Sue that her son-in-law was pure evil and that he had to be eliminated. Everything broke on the night of February 11th. But before Carol Sue ever went near Brian, something else happened that a lot of people leave out of the story. She actually targeted a child first. She went after Brian's 10-year-old nephew. State prosecutors later revealed that she tried to abduct the boy because she believed the board had signaled he was evil too. And the only reason the child survived unharmed is because his mother unexpectedly drove into the driveway at that exact moment, causing Carol Sue to back off and flee. But by the time she drove to the house in Minco, the delusion was in absolute control. It was the middle of the night, the house was dark, and everyone was fast asleep, including Brian. Carol Sue walked into the kitchen, picked up a knife, and walked directly into the bedroom where her son-in-law was sleeping. She drove the blade into his chest a single time. A single wound was all it took. And Brian woke up. Brian did not die instantly. He was fully conscious, understood exactly what just happened to him, and began begging for medical help. Prosecutors explicitly stated in the court that this man was actively pleading for his life. The heartbreaking part, his wife Tammy was right there in the house. She heard her husband's cries, and instead of dialing emergency services or trying to stop the bleeding, Tammy took the bloody weapon from her mother and hid it. She didn't offer any medical aid. She concealed the murder weapon, gathered up her 15 and 10-year-old daughters, and walked right out the front door alongside Carol Sue. They left Brian bleeding on the bedroom floor, all alone, pleading for help that was never going to come. The horror of that night did not stop at the front door. The four of them piled into the family car with Carol Sue driving. Tammy sat in the passenger seat, and the two young girls were in the back after being marched directly past their dying father. They pulled onto Interstate 44 in the dead of night, speeding northeast away from Oklahoma City. As they neared the town of Chandler, Carol Sue decided that the directive from the board wasn't finished. While traveling at full highway speed with her daughter and young grandchildren inside the vehicle, she intentionally swerved and drove the car directly into a massive highway sign. The state prosecutors later summarized it as an intentional murder-suicide attempt meant to take out everyone in the vehicle. Miraculously, the crash failed to kill them. Tammy and both daughters managed to crawl out of the crumpled vehicle with only minor cuts and scratches. The only person critically injured in the impact was Carol Sue herself. The crash completely shattered both of her ankles. And then she got out of the car. And by any medical logic, a person with shattered ankles cannot stand upright, let alone walk. But driven by an absolute psychotic break, Carol Sue stood up on the shoulder of the interstate. She lunged at her 15-year-old granddaughter, attempting to physically push the teenager into the path of oncoming highway traffic. The girl successfully fought her off, so Carol Sue then turned to the 10-year-old child, wrapping her hands around her neck in an attempt to strangle her. When the girls broke free, Carol Sue fled. In the freezing February weather, she stripped off every single piece of her clothing. Completely naked, traveling on 2 broken ankles, she climbed over the concrete median barrier of Interstate 44 and vanished entirely into the dark woods. When the highway patrol finally arrived, they encountered a heavily damaged car, a traumatized mother with 2 young girls, a scene of absolute violence an hour away that hadn't even been discovered yet, and a trail of bare footprints leading over the concrete median into the tree line. Police went into those woods with flashlights and discovered Carol Sue hiding naked in the dark. When she was taken into custody, she offered an explanation for why she ran. She told the officers that the moment Brian died, the evil that had been inside of him didn't vanish, and it jumped directly into her body. In her mind, she wasn't running from the police. She was trying to physically flee from the entity she believed was trapped inside of her. So the courtroom proceedings that followed were entirely unprecedented. Carol Sue was charged with first-degree murder, while Tammy was charged as an accessory for actively hiding the weapon and leaving her husband to bleed to death. Both women were also hit with child abuse charges for the trauma inflicted on the 2 young girls. The entire community of Minco was left devastated. There was no rational motive to point to. And so because of this, the prosecution did something incredibly rare in American legal history. They entered the physical Ouija board into evidence. It was tagged, numbered, and sat on the evidence table throughout a first-degree murder trial because it was the only piece of context that explained the motive. Ultimately, the court evaluated Carol Sue's 53 years of an unblemished life and ruled her not guilty by reason of insanity. She was committed to a secure mental health facility rather than a state prison. The insanity defense is notoriously difficult to prove, but the psychological break that happened, the courts recognized that the person operating in that house was entirely detached from reality. Clinically, psychologists identify this as a late-onset psychotic break. While extremely rare, a delusion of this magnitude inevitably seeks a medium to express itself, and sitting right there on the table was an object literally built to deliver messages. Science completely understands how these boards operate through the ideomotor effect. Your muscles make microscopic, involuntary movements that you are completely unaware of, sliding the plastic piece across the board. Because your brain doesn't consciously register that you are causing the movement, it genuinely feels like an outside, otherworldly force that's steering the game. The board acts as an absolute psychological mirror. Whatever is growing in the deepest, most hidden corners of a vulnerable mind, that board will spell it back out one letter at a time in a voice that feels external. For a woman experiencing an undetected, profound religious delusion, that voice didn't sound like a medical emergency to her. To her, it sounded like a command from God. Brian Roach was 34 years old. He was a husband, a father who lost his life in his own home. Those 2 daughters who were just 15 and 10 on that freezing February night are grown women today. And they have to carry the immense weight of what occurred in that bedroom and on that highway for the rest of their lives. If you happen to have one of these vintage boards stashed away in a closet, under a bed, or packed in a box from an old childhood sleepover, no one's telling you to throw it away, but no, actually I am. Get rid of that thing and stick to Monopoly or Guess Who. I can't. Anyways, thank you all so much for hanging out and listening to this crazy case with me. I'm going to go ahead and clear my head, and I will see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the plot.